show up. You need to walk through the door and be with people. If you don't talk about the pain that's within your body, you will end up killing yourself. You will end up getting very sick. What do we do? All these things caused you grief. The only unseen unity we have is grief and pain. And that's what brings us together. And that's what gives us purpose.
Hello, and welcome to Behind the Spotlight. I'm your host, Kelly Wright. Today, we will have a wonderful, wonderful guest, and we shall highlight her, lift her up, and let her explain to the world how she helps people turn their pain into purpose. Will you let us introduce Christine? Go ahead, Christine.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. I am so excited to be here with you. This is absolutely a wonderful opportunity to come together with you and talk about something that we often don't talk about. Yeah, where would you want me to
Let's
start? This is
do
a
it.
big
Let's
subject.
get started. So yes, the work that you've doing has been helping many, 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 many people around the world. But I want to start with asking you, what brought you to a career in grief and trauma recovery?
I actually believe the career was brought to me.
Mm,
Um, as a young child, I experienced the death of my only brother, Robert. He fell over the Niagara Falls Gorge to his death. He was 19 and I was 14. And I'm receiving that death notification at such a young age, and it being so traumatic, but also very public.
mm,
It was in newspapers. Niagara Falls is often seen as this attraction for people. And then 6 months after that, when I was heading into high school, um, I had a large mass start growing on my leg, and it was my right leg. And I'm a 6 foot redhead who was like, hey, I'm going to go out for the basketball team. This is going to be like a new start. I was leaving grade school, heading to high school, and I ended up in a hospital not even 6 months after Robert died. And I just remember seeing my parents sit in these little round boat chairs and this doctor look at me and say, we fear your daughter has bone cancer. And
mm,
I think at that very moment, as a young girl, not only was I dealing with the fact that people I love could die, it was my own immortality.
mm,
And it just kind of whacked me in the face. And I remember thinking, like, do I want to be with Rob? Or no, I want to be here with my parents. And that experience, I often describe it by using a doll from the 80s, Annie, and she had red hair and blue eyes. And I placed her in a jar because that grief experience as a young child was like watching a movie. It
mm,
was kind of, I lived in disbelief. Um, and I started with the funeral, breaking the halves of necklaces apart, breaking books in half, because I wanted to put halves of everything into my brother's casket when he was buried, because I wanted him to never forget about me.
mm.
Um,
What a wonderful
so,
concept.
pardon?
What a wonderful concept.
Yeah, what you don't know you're doing as a child, right? You just organically do it as children. There was no set of rules on how to do this, right? Nobody taught you. They teach you how to procreate, like how to fall in love and how to create a family, but we never complete the circle to say what happens when that person dies. So after I woke up from my surgery with my leg, uh, this old doctor was at the end of my bed, and he says, "Hey, sunshine." And I just remember waking up as this miserable teenager, right? And he was like, "You must have an angel watching over you." And
Mm,
I was like, and he's like, "You don't have cancer.
mm,
You have osteomyelitis. It's a bone infection, usually found in older people." But he says, I want to tell you something. If you don't talk about the pain that's within your body, you will end up killing yourself. you will end up getting very sick. You need to talk about your pain. You need to share this. I had a journal and a blue suitcase shoved under my bed, and all the halves of everything I placed with Rob were in there. And I would write, but I was also living in this jar.
Mm.
And it was like I never processed any emotions. It was like I was watching a movie. And often in my work, people go, I know what that's like. It's like you're just in awe of everything that's happening. So I
Yeah.
started, pardon?
The observer, like the observer.
Yeah, very true, very true. The observer. And then in school, I was in the special learning disability class. Often they wondered if I was comprehending things, but I was also dealing with a lot of emotional things going on in my life. I did find out that I'm dyslexic. So once I realized that the world was kind of backwards, that made life a little easier.
Yeah.
And I ended up healing in the sense that my leg healed. I graduated with a scholarship and I very much wanted to study human behavior. And I joined the local college, and I was the only person to receive 100% in human relations.
Nice.
And well, yeah, the moment they told me, my professor looked at me and said, "You're that little girl, you're that redheaded girl from the newspaper." And I was like, "Oh." And he goes, "Your brother, he ended up falling over the falls." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You're studying yourself." I instantly dropped out. I walked away and I was like, oh no, I don't want to do this. That means we're going to open the jar. We're going to, and in this jar by now, I've placed in the death of my brother, my educational disabilities, anytime somebody commented on how tall I was or how red my hair was, or it all just went into the jar. It was like, this was a way not to deal with things. And then every once in a while, the top popped off.
It
And
always does.
yeah, it always does. And here I was, in my teen years, just going, why does my head hurt? And why am I? And at that time, you would go to the clinic and they'd give you a shot of Demerol in your butt and you would go to sleep. And then you would wake up the next day back in your jar.
Mm.
And so I went on to have my first child. I really lived my life like this, and I became a hairdresser, which I absolutely loved. And
And
I
it's
had my,
amazing, by the way. Amazing. You
yeah, thank you. Well, I figured I had to learn how to tame the curls, and um, it was always something I was doing. And the real reason that I chose hairdressing was because I got to meet other people and they told me their stories.
Mm.
And
Yes.
I really loved being able to make them feel good about themselves. And I noticed that once the body looked good, people started to think more positive. They started to have this better outlook on life. Um, and then during this time, I would often go visit my grandmother. We called her Oma, and she was the mother of 9 children, my father being the oldest. And I would go every Thursday, and on her mantle would be a picture of my brother and I. And I remember the one day going in because I had some exciting news to tell her. And I looked at that picture and I was like, who's that guy? And then I didn't even recognize myself. And her and I sat that day, drank tea, and I shared about the fact, well, she actually shared it. She went, "You're pregnant." And I was like, "Oh, I am." And, we talked about the fact that maybe it'll be a girl because I already had a son. And the next time I was with her, even 34 years later, she looked at me and she said, "I'm dying." She had a stroke and she was falling into a coma. And she said, "Chrissy, it's time to wake up. I'm I'm gonna go say hello to your brother." And it was like the jar just busted. It was like it just went and often working with people or doing a keynote speech, I hold that little doll up and say, here's a child in a woman's body, really not knowing what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. This is not something people talked about. This was not something you were taught how to handle. This this wasn't a thing. And here you were faced with this enormous amount of pain that was not just mental, not just emotional. It was physical too.
Hmm.
But no one had wanted to talk to you about it. Nobody wanted to explore it with you. It was something that you felt that eerie uncomfortableness. And then I started writing. And it happened when I stood in front of that casket looking out at my family and I said, "Where's Robert?" And I just remember the whole room. It was like they knew that I was in this jar and I didn't know. And I started writing and I pulled that blue suitcase out and I went back to figure out where Robert had died exactly, went back to the funeral home. And, I could talk for hours of all the memories that just flooded my brain. And I came out with a book called Where's Robert? And the story goes along to share how me, Chrissy at the time, and her dog Peanut, who was my brother's dog, go along looking for their brother who has died. And she finds him. She finds him in the love of her family and the love of our community, in my memories. I wanted children to have their own memory box. So it came with a white box. It also came with a journal for them to write their story and a letter to write to me. And I went along and I quit my job. I was running corporate hair salons. And I remember when I wrote the book, I quit. And I remember the gentleman across the table just looked at me and he goes, "You're at the height of your career. What are you doing?" And I was like, "This is what I'm meant to do. I know it. I feel it. And this is why I was put here."
Hmm.
And I established Robert's Press, a grief resource center that was to help people through life's challenges. Our first challenge being the death of a loved one. So I wanted to make sure no child grieved alone. I wanted them to be able to have a resource that let them know that this is not done alone. And I published it in 2000.
Okay.
In 2001, Um, at that point, yeah, but I had it right down to the number because I had to get a bank loan and I had to do a business plan. And they said, "How do you plan on marketing this?" And I said, "I'm the little girl. I'm the redheaded girl you wrote about in 1986, who you took photos of and where her brother jumped or fell over Niagara Falls. I want to make, I want to share the story." He was actually going to the washroom. He thought it was grass, it was the tops of trees. He was young and these accidents happen. But I want to let people know that we can grieve and we can grieve openly. I got my loan, and the next day I was on the front page of the newspaper. And yeah, it was great. And I sold about 22 bucks a week with two children in tow at this time.
Okay.
And yeah, it was such a huge thing for me at that time.
Yeah.
Uh, because you were impacting even just one person. You were making a difference.
Mhm.
Um,
That's
and
really,
then
really, really major, the impact we have on others dealing with this. And and you shared that a lot of people don't even know how to deal with it, and that brings me to my next question. Could you share a little bit about why we grieve? Can you share, let
Mhm.
us let the world know, why do we grieve and why do we often avoid talking about it?
Well, I think it's one of the major reasons. And what happened to me next in that story was the night of September 11th, I received a phone call and they were looking for over 6,000 copies of Where's Robert? And I thought that man answers this question so well, as he says, "I have over 6,000 children and families that are grieving, and we don't have a resource. We have nothing." And they, we were able to fundraise and send over 6,000 copies down to Ground Zero. And then I had the opportunity of working in grief camps and really looking at all of this. And what it all came down to was our ability to love. And I don't think we understand, but when we really look at it, when we fall in love, such as you buy a new puppy
Yeah.
and you're in love with this puppy, what happens to your physical body? Your dopamine rises up. You have to get the guts up to figure out what type of dog you want. Then we have to go into, will it fit into our family? Your serotonin kind of rises. You find yourself with a little bit of energy. This happens when you fall in love with, a new lover, all sorts of things that we fall in love with, maybe the birth of a new child. But our physical body is very excited. And we are excited with hormones and the endorphins are going. But there is one thing in this world that, first off, does not discriminate, and that's grief. Doesn't care about your wealth, your culture, your gender. Grief is the only thing that is an equalizer. And when it enters, the serotonin, the dopamine, the endorphins, the energy you felt is completely shut down, completely shut down. And this leaves us in this state, and the body starts to react. And, our prefrontal cortex, which is found at the front of your brain, this is your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Mm.
So the body and the mind start connecting and going, emergency. There's a trauma. What do we do? What do we do? And we completely shut down. And the body absolutely has no control over its reactions to a death notification. The moment we receive a death notification, the body just collapses and all of that goes down. So the reason why we grieve is because we have the capability of loving beyond bounds. We have the capability of loving, and it's a direct result of that.
And you spoke about, the body immediately shutting down. Can you now speak about how grief affects our daily life in respects to that?
Mhm. Well, when this happens, I think a lot of times people they really start looking inwards and they think they should be, I should be able to do the funeral and I should be able to do this. And how come I feel like I'm foggy? And in our daily lives, people don't realize grief has always been there, always. When you were a child and you didn't make it on a sports team, when a pet maybe died, or you moved homes, or you immigrated, all these things caused you grief. And you went through a series of emotions, stages, tasks, they are called a variety of things, and you go through them at a different intensity or level. And when the loss of something very, very major enters in, all of this shuts. And it is so hard to go, how do I wake up the next day and start, just having a coffee? How do I get out of bed? And then we run into, should I be happy? Because I feel guilty for being happy. I feel guilty for healing. So it really is like a pinwheel where we have a variety of different emotions, a variety of different stages that are spinning. And in our daily life, some days our minds are spinning and we have all these emotions and all these feelings, which are affecting us physically. We might be sweating, our heart might be going, and we can't function. We need to stay home. We need to take a day off.
Mhm.
But then another day, we may wake up feeling this sense of hope and resilience, and we can walk out the door and do it. And so in our daily lives, at least for the first 6 months, it's hard to function.
Yeah.
It's hard to get yourself going. And the intensity is one of the major things that people, we tend to look at it. And an example of this is when somebody says to me, my dog died and I can't function.
Mm.
But my close aunt died and I'm fine. And I'm like, because you woke up every morning to that dog. It was part of your life. So that loss is intensified. And that is one of the major things that we got to look at is how is it affecting you and your life? And and it can be a like it's debilitating at times for certain people. And it takes a good 6 months to a year to finally pull yourself back to a place where, work functioning, the fog kind of lifts.
Yes, yes, yes. Debilitating 100%. And
Mm.
that whole process of letting the fog lift, right? So, in thinking about that, could you tell everyone what is the stages of grief and how can they guide in healing?
hmm Well, what happened was after doing Where's Robert, I ended up working in grief camps around the world, and mainly with families and children that were affected by traumatic grief. So, in watching this, and in studying this and researching it, I really went back to where did this all start? How did this all start? Because in my time, no one taught me anything about grief. There was no university course I could take on grief. Um, there was nothing. And so with the research, I ended up back with Kubler-Ross, as we all know. She came out in 1969, amazing woman, and she studied the dying. So we have to really kind of look at this because, and she says this in her own words, I did not study the living. I studied a person who was at the end of their life and dying. And what she observed from this was they went into denial, anger, there was that stage of bargaining, and then a depression, and then they came to an acceptance that they were going to die. And we as the living, sometimes that acceptance is like if, we have a grandparent dying and they look at you and say, similar to what my grandmother had said to me, I'm dying and I'm okay with that now.
Mhm.
But as the living, we never really researched that. And if we look at Bowlby and Parks in 1970, 1980, they came out with a series of processes, which was numbness, shock, yearning, disorganization, and a reorganization. And then Warden's task was in the 80s. They did a similar thing, accept reality, process the pain of grief, adjust to the world, and then find an ending connection. David Kessler, revisited Kubler-Ross's Stages of Grief, who he was a good friend of hers in 2005, and he added in shock and testing. But with all of this, and through all of this, I created a program called Hugs, Helping Understand Grief. And we implemented, and when I say we, I mean school boards, hospices, a variety of different organizations that allow children to organically grieve. And this is where, the benefit of what I had was I did not have stages to share with people. I organically watched children who puddle jumped. They jumped into their grief, they felt it, they absorbed it, and then they jumped out and they were able to function. So taking all of this, I did another research where I started up Grief Uprooted, where I was going to interview over 150 people, and I wanted to see what were they really, what were their stories, their lived grief stories about grief. Instead of saying, hey, tell me what your stages of grief are, I want to hear your grief story from beginning to end. And I recorded all of them and came out with a book called Grief Uprooted: The Seven Stages of Living Grief. And I wanted it to be interactive. And what I found was that, yes, like Cooper Ross, we fell into that shock and denial. With living grief, we fell into this grasping where we were trying to figure out, is this real? Is this really going on? This can't be real. And I know yourself and sharing your story with me that was huge, like this. this cannot be reality. And then we fell into a melancholy, which is slightly different than that depression, where we're feeling this immense sorrow within ourselves and
Mhm.
for our children and our loved ones. So it's slightly different than depression. And then this realization that, wow, this is happening. This is really happening. And then we move into trying to find a clarity. And that kind of ran in interviewing all of these people where they wanted a clarity of how the person died. They wanted a clarity of why did this happen? Then they had a clarity of their own self. And
Mhm.
then they moved into a compassion. And that compassion was for themselves and really seeing a purpose for themselves, realizing, as I did, this is what I'm put here on earth for. This is my, this is my aha, right? This is where I should be. And that compassion not only lent to themselves, it lent to their family members and it lent to people outside of their circle. They now had this compassion when they met somebody who had experienced grief. And then that took them to this resilience where I have seen people, it's unbelievable because I share it all in the book as a QR. You can go and listen to their stories. But grief has completely changed the directions of people's lives, exactly like you. And they fall into this, they do amazing, amazing things. It's such an honor to hear, but it is also just mind-blowing seeing what grief has brought to people. So
Mhm.
this process, I just want to make one thing very, very clear. It's not stages we go through and get over. It is integrated. This is integrated into you. It has always been there with you, um, but it will happen over and over. You may go back to disbelief one morning. You may wake up feeling melancholy. You may wake up feeling all this hope and you're going to go attack the world. All of that is completely normal.
Mhm. Yes,
Mm.
thank you. Thank you for talking about the integration of the whole process and all those stages. And so I think in knowing that now, I can ask, how do we how do we help ourselves and others that are going through the grief process?
And I think we underestimate the power of presence. This is the one time that so many times when I'm asked to train volunteers, I do various trainings and programs, and I look at them and they often say, I don't have a degree in this. I don't know how to do this. And I look at them and go, do you have empathy? And they'll say, yes, that's what you need.
Mhm.
You show up. You need to walk through the door and be with people. And I think when we're grieving, we isolate. We think, oh no, we don't want to share this with anybody. We don't want people to know we're going through this. This is absolutely the wrong time to isolate yourself because that is the only way we heal is together. So, being able to take a step, go for a walk one day, just be able to get up and go, today I'm actually going to put my sneakers on and I'm going to go outside and go for a walk. Walking by somebody who smiles at you and smiles back, you have that ability to just feel again
Mhm.
and not to place huge expectations in front of you and to embrace those grounding techniques. I think a lot of times we may giggle and think, well, deep breathing, do we really need to do that? It often, with younger children, I always say, put your hand up and they'll be having, either anxiety or these stages are spinning or they're having a bad day and just simply like
Mhm.
just a simple task of breathing in and out and being able to have something you can look at really helps people just start to feel their body again. And another thing is there is a lot of resources since this experience. Um, I now have come out with so many different resources because what I realized was the value of a small item, such as we did the forever. the forever hearts. And this represents that necklace underneath my bed, which has got two hearts. You'll see a little one and a larger one. And what I love to do with them is each one is a different color. They resonate with each stage of the grief. Um, and we even have a glow in the dark one. But you can place one heart in a special place that reminds you of your loved one, and the other one can be kept with you. Some people will do exactly what I did and place them in the casket and keep one for themselves. And it's really just representing that unbroken connection. And I think that's what we need to focus on in our daily lives. Concrete things, the journal, the walking, the learning to breathe, and understanding that this is a normal process.
Mhm.
Also, if it goes off the rails, you feel like, hey, I can't do this alone, definitely counseling, being able to go out and talk to somebody, join a support group. And I think that we're now moving to a place where we can actually go to our medical doctor and say, this is what I'm experiencing. And we're starting to recognize it, which is absolutely amazing to me.
Mhm.
Mm.
That's beautiful, beautiful. So, for someone's listening right now who may be dealing with grief, or they know someone dealing with grief and they're not handling it well and see them struggling in that process, what would you want to say to them?
And this is somebody who is presently grieving.
Yes, or
Yeah.
someone who's a family member or a friend of someone grieving, and they're not getting through the process and they're struggling to
Mhm.
accept it. What would you want to say to them? What advice would you give them?
The very first thing I would say to them is, you're not alone. You are not alone. This is the human condition that affects every one of us.
Mhm,
And I think that we lose sight of the fact that it is through your ability to love, through your ability to experience love, that you are now grieving.
mhm,
And uniting and talking about it and sharing your grief story, we underestimate our stories. We underestimate our journeys. And being able to reach out to a friend, sit with a friend, join a support group, and share that grief story allows you to ruminate in your mind and go through that story over and over and over again, even through journaling, even through talking into your phone and sharing your story. All these avenues allow you to ruminate and release. And that's what we want to do. We want to allow our body to release. We want to allow our mind to release. And don't underestimate drinking water, taking care of yourself with the food you're eating, and really connecting with people. Jump online to a support group. Be able to join other people in their grief. Spiritually, go to what brings you comfort. Go back to that if you've walked away from it. Have that conversation and realize how valuable your story is and how valuable you are to the people that are here also grieving with you. I think for somebody who has a friend grieving, that really brings me back to the power of presence and being able to just call that friend up and give them a chance to talk. And don't be afraid to say, how are you doing today? Or, often working with people, I'll say, tell me about your husband who passed. I would love to know what they did. Tell me about their personality. Tell me who they are. And then tell me your grief story. So
mhm.
ultimately, that ability to share and understand what you're going through is something that is a result of your ability to love, and you will love again.
Yes, yes, wonderful, wonderful, very, very powerful. So, again, just lastly, why don't you let everyone know, again, about your book, Where's Robert, your organization, Grief Uprooted, so they can get in touch with you if need be, reach out to you for some resources or some help, or even tapping into your book.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you can jump online to griefuprooted.com, and that is about all the books and resources that I've created, a little bit about me and the training I do. My books are published by robertspress.com. And that's a publishing company that's geared towards sharing people's stories and bringing those to the masses and allowing people to heal within each other. So that's robertspress.com. We carry over 500 different grief resources. And yes, there is that many out there because so many times people say there's no books on this. There is now. We have a lot of books that are available and resources. It's not just books. We have empathy crying teddy bears. We have the forever hearts. So it's an array of things to help you grieve. So that's robertspress.com and griefuprooted.com.
Nice,
Mhm.
nice. Thank you so much, Christine, for being here. It was truly a pleasure to have you as a guest and just let you share your story and just tell us how your work has been impacting the world and everyone that you've come in contact with. So I want to thank you again for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for all the people you've helped and that you've allowed them a space to turn their pain into purpose. And I want this to be a place for healing and where people who know that healing is possible, pardon me, and expect it. I love to see this dialogue going on and we can explore ways that we could possibly serve our community together after this. But yes, I want to thank you again. Very, 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 very powerful story and powerful impact you're having on the world. Do
Oh,
you
thank you
have
for having
any
me.
one last remaining remark as I ask you to tell the world how can they turn their pain into purpose?
Hmm. Simply by stepping up and placing our love and similarities together more than looking at our differences and realizing the only unseen unity we have is grief and pain. And that's what brings us together, and that's what gives us purpose. We can console and be together. It's only together that we grieve, and it's only together that we heal. Hmm.
Nice, beautiful. There you have it, world. Christine, author of Where's Robert and her organization Grief Uprooted. Check her out online, find her on social media, and let her show you how the grief process can turn into a healing journey. Thank you.